Okay, so our next song is Immediate Results at 120% speed. Now this path is a bit more involved than the previous two. I think there's six activations, maybe 7, and a couple of weird ones as well. But we start off pretty simple. There are 2 whammy phrases. So the only difficulty here with whammying this phrase is I tap the main riff thing with the chords, and I'll explain that later on. But I tap that, so going from whammy to starting to tap here meant I had to one hand this first bit, but it's possible to one hand, so it's not the end of the world. And then an easier whammy here, and then the first act is just on this yellow here, and it's a yellow strum. It might not be too obvious from the chart here, but it's yellow strum, so it's kind of easy to remember. First act, no problem. Then we have this phrase, which you won't overlap if you act here. I don't think there's any way you can get too much star power to last this much longer. So yeah, that's fine. Just a lot of whammying, so yeah, every single phrase so far has been a whammy phrase. And this second act, the actual position for the act is kind of in the middle of like a random string of notes. It can be a bit difficult to figure out exactly where you activate, but you can see it's at the start of a measure, so it's not the end of the world. And you can it's basically where it starts to descend. So after this red note, it goes into descending patterns, and this yellow note here is the peak of this like zigzag here. So yeah, just on this yellow. And it doesn't matter too much if you mess this one up, because it's pretty similar the whole way through. There are little breaks, like you can see here. There's a break between this orange and yellow, so it is best to activate where it says, but it's not the end of the world if you do screw it up. Okay, so nothing too bad so far. Then the third act is where you'll have it's a more challenging activation. So you've got a little bit of whammy here, and then the ideal place to activate is right here on this blue note. Now this little this measure here is just measure notes. It's kind of quick at 120% speed. It is doable to one hand, but I much preferred tapping it. I missed some times when I tried to one hand it, so I opted for tilt act here. So tilting while tapping is kind of tricky. So, and especially to activate on an exact note. So sometimes it'd be a little bit off. So this is one of the more challenging activations. It might have been, I don't know if it was the most challenging activation in the first pool of songs, but it's definitely up there for me, this tilt activation in this tapping section. So that's the third act. And the notes underneath it are relatively difficult as well. But yeah, after that, act number 4 is easy enough. You just wait for the second of these GRBO hooks and activate on the green note. No problem there. Pretty simple. And this next activation is also kind of strange. So we have whammy. You want to whammy as much as possible with this phrase, and that can be a bit tricky as well with this little trill into open note. I think it's forced. I don't know if it's strangely forced, but it's forced in a way that makes whammying a little bit tricky. So either way, yeah, you want to be whammying that as much as possible, and you want to be whammying straight away. Try and get early whammy on this first thing, because it's very possible you don't get enough star power to activate on this orange note. You see, the phrase doesn't end till this note, so this is an act before the end of the phrase. So once again, because this act immediately follows whammy, I opted for another tilt act here. And what I would do, I would just be tilting the whole way through, and I would normally end up acting a little bit early, probably at the tail end of this yellow system. So sacrifice a couple of points, I guess, makes this squeeze a little bit harder. But yeah, just tilting until it activates. And if it didn't act, then obviously you'd have to act immediately here. Then you'd lose quite a lot of points. So yeah, this is another strange activation. And then we come into the final act, which is not hard, but I changed the position of it more than any of the other acts. See, since, as I said, I tap this little bit here, I opted to activate on this, I think this blue note, or somewhere in this measure, where it starts descending. It doesn't lose that many points, really, because as you can see, it's very similar. It's 16ths here and it's 16ths here, so it doesn't matter that much. But yeah, I would activate here, then begin tapping, and then that's it. Squeeze as many notes in as possible. And that's a path for immediate results. It's definitely more tricky than the first two we've seen. And this song is doubly interesting because the notes themselves are pretty all over the place. There's not many charts like this. And we'll get into that in a moment. Okay, so now it's time to take a look at the notes of the immediate results. I would say, well, it's not necessarily the most interesting so far. It's you could say it's on par with Hand Eye. I think it's a little bit more interesting in terms of methods though, for me at least. So, well, we'll just get into it. I'm not going to go through like every single 16th note section. That's a bit redundant because a lot of it is just, just hit the notes. There's nothing more to it. So I'll just go through the bits where I had to either like develop a method or something like that, or had to slide in a weird way. I don't know. I don't think that applies to this song. But not interesting enough. But immediately, nice. We get the first part of the song, and I actually haven't put this on 120% speed, so I'll go ahead and do that now. So we get this bit, this weird chord bit. And I'm sure most people one-handed this in the tournament. However, I was not one of them, as I alluded to earlier. So it's possible to one-hand, but I think a lot of people will agree with me when I say that this certain chord pattern, this here, where you do, especially in second position, so you have to do, it's basically three, what do you call it? It doesn't matter. In a row, like sequential, if you will. If you go up the fretboard without like the two notes in between chords, it would be these. This would be ascending. So yellow, blue, yellow, orange, and blue, orange. And doing that without using your index at all is pretty bad on its own. Even doing it in first position is pretty bad. But yeah, doing that it's really awkward, and it happens quite a few times during the song. So I decided, it took me a little bit to figure this out, but I thought maybe there's a way you could tap this, and there actually is. So the way I look at this is I tap the whole thing, besides the bit where we have to whammy. So I would be tapping this entire time. And I'll just play it first so you can see. Well, I forgot a bit there. So, simple enough, I just basically pretend that instead of chords, it's like you split each note of the chord up. So I think of it instead as single notes, 6 single notes, yellow, blue, blue, yellow, orange, yellow, orange, blue. So a bit like 3 grace notes, but it's a trill basically. And standard tap that, and it's so much more consistent. So you're playing corner, and it's going to be really lenient on that on its own. So I just thought it made the most sense, and it does turn out to be really consistent. And it, it's a lot. It keeps your hand less tired as well, because there's so much movement if you try and one-hand it. It's just not adding. It's not consistent enough, and that's the whole point of it. Be consistent. The only thing it does do is make like knowing when to start tapping a bit weird, or when to stop tapping. But it's okay. And then, as far as these single chords go, just do the same thing. A double blue tap while I'm anchoring yellow, and they automatically hit. And that's the main, well, it's not really the main riff, but it's the intro-outro section. And that's how I decided to do that. So, there's actually nothing really of note until we get to solo 1A, the piano solo. So, this is, I guess, probably actually the hardest part of the song. It's very tricky even at normal speed, I would say. Right. So we don't need to worry about that first bit, just slide down, do a quint, whatever. It's not particularly noteworthy, at least not compared to the rest of the solo. Now I can't slow it down because I'm at 120% speed, but I will pause through it. So, we're going to want to strum this red note, and then I like one-hand the triplet, and then we start tapping here. And that's pretty regular standard tapping. There isn't really too much to say there, just tap the highest note as I serve. And then that little bit there, it's definitely easier to just slide it rather than try and alt tap it like this. It gets a bit confusing because it's not just straight alt tapping. But we do want to start tapping here. So it's not exactly just descending triplets and quads there. You can see there's little missing notes, but you can treat it as if it were descending triplets and quads. It doesn't really matter. The only difference is you need to be a little bit quicker, I guess. So yeah, we're sliding after that bit. And also stay in first position for the whole thing, because it switches about a lot. And then we're just one-handing this bit, including the blue wall, and these quads, which is maybe a little bit unconventional, especially for me, because I love to tap everything. But it just made more sense to me to just one-hand that. Just coming out of the blue wall, it just feels... I don't know. I probably would tap it if it weren't for these triplets at the end. Also, I can probably switch to Soul 1B because we've done with 1A now. So just one-handing here. Right, and then it comes to the end of the solo, which is probably the weirdest part. So I'll set a section to be here. So at first glance, it might seem a bit difficult to like figure out what exactly you're supposed to do. The pattern at the end is not really a pattern. It's sort of just all over the place. If you try and one-hand it, you'll discover it's pretty not easy to one-hand. I struggle to do that. But so much a bit like the main riff, with these first couple of chords, I double tap them. And then that chord underneath, if you tap the blue and you anchor in the notes below, that just auto hits. And what I basically did was chimneys here, quad chimneys, maybe even a quint chimney. So it's very ghost heavy. We can see here you can change this. You tap the yellow, so you just pretend that's a yellow followed by a red to orange quad zig. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I might have done a quint zig while tapping yellow. You can see it comes back down. And then the yellow, you can just do that actually as a regular zigzag there. You can tap that as it is. So there's a lot of ghosting there. But it makes it so much less awkward, that's the thing. And as I keep repeating myself here, we're trying to be as consistent as possible. We're not trying to be as clean as possible, we're trying to be as consistent as possible, and this makes it pretty trivial. It's still relatively quick, don't get me wrong, but it does make the method pretty easy to remember. And that's that. And then we'll do the full solo just so I'm not forgetting anything. And that's the piano solo. Pretty weird, pretty difficult to figure out, and one of the most missable parts of the first pool for me. And it's sort of over after that point. I'll just quickly go to the final chorus, because it does this again at the end, but there's nothing new there. It's just, you need to know it's there, so you don't screw up. But the guitar solo is not hard on its own, but when you throw in that tilt act... Right, and this is what I was mentioning earlier with the weird... It's all strums there. The last red really can throw you off, especially if you're hammering. And then actually this is fine. I think we want to go straight to 2B. Right, yeah. So I'm where we're going. I would be doing this at this point. So tilting while doing this, it doesn't make it that much harder. But that yellow strum in there can throw you off. Especially considering the star power notes, you know, they're all rotating or whatever. It can be more of a distraction than you would think. But if we break it down just a little bit without the tilt, so we get the 2 doublets, that's fine. And then it could be worth doing a ghost between the yellow and the orange, but I don't think I'd do that. But this part where it goes from green up to the grace note, I'm not sure if I automatically do a ghost there or not. Let me just see. Alright, so you don't have to do a ghost, but, well, the ghost isn't between the green and the blue. The ghost is actually a ghost blue there, which you'd be anchoring blue into the orange, then you'd ghost blue into the yellow, and it makes it a bit more natural than just going blue orange then straight to a yellow without anchoring blue at all. Just a little consistency thing once again. And all be said and done, that is it. There really isn't anything else. It's just simply 16ths sliding up appropriate times. You know, it's nothing too bad. So you finish up the song. And that's it. After this, it's just one hammering. I guess I could talk about this last transition from orange into a green, red, blue chord. So it doesn't matter that much. So there's 3 of them. You might as well just strum twice after the first one. It's unlikely if you can do the rest of the song you'd struggle with this though. So it's basically a pinky. You slide the pinky down. I don't think there's any other way people would do it. If you try and do it like as if you're playing a GRBO chord, that's a bit weird. And it is weird for me. But we'll leave it there. It's been quite a detailed explanation, I think. So we'll go to the run now. Okay, so that's immediate results. You'll notice that I didn't get enough whammy on the one phrase where I tilt, well, the second phrase where I tilt, and that just shows, you know, Explorer whammy can be a bit bad, but that's the backup, so it's always useful to have a backup in this sort of thing. And as it turns out, I don't even think I reached the red sustain, the whammy was that bad. But yeah, ideally you'd want to be getting about 530k, that deficit, this 5k deficit here is probably a lot of it is due to that. But yeah, whatever, it's still a demonstration, you get the gist of what we're going for here. But anyway, the next song is The Way It Ends, which probably won't be too interesting, but I'm obviously going to do it anyway, so I'll see you there.